The Sentinel is known to be reliable, fearless, disciplined, consistent, courageous, motivated, and skillful.
So do what you feel passionate about. Take chances.
All these qualities start from the mind. Your mind can be your worst enemy or your most powerful weapon.
The world becomes your library to help you to become better at your craft.
Is this the dagger?
Learn how to achieve greatness and tap into the Sentinel mindset.
This episode is brought to you by The Arena. The Arena focuses on helping law enforcement and security professionals achieve their ultimate work experience, curriculum, and fitness goals. Visit thearenatoronto.com.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome on this wonderful special day. I have a very good friend here. Also, not just a good friend, but someone in this industry that I highly, highly respect. We are talking today to Steve Summerville. Now, for those of you that didn't listen to our episodes in the past, who is Steve? Okay, so first of all, Steve is the president of Stay Safe Programs and Stay Safe Inc. And Stay Safe is an incredible, incredible catalog of training programs that our organization and hundreds across Canada and dare I even say abroad?
Yeah, abroad, absolutely.
Yeah, utilize.
Certainly.
And they're very instrumental. We will reference all those episodes in the links so you guys can see the kind of training that we do. But Steve also had a career in policing for 24
actually.
24 years.
Yeah.
I don't know why I say 26.
It's a good number.
24 years with Toronto Police.
That's right.
And he was instrumental also as a trainer in COB College that I believe, Steve, if I'm going to make this number correct, has trained over 15,000 people through that college.
We trained a lot of people, that through public safety or public order, and also finished off my careers, at the Ontario Police College.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look, I think that's phenomenal.
Thank you, sir.
You are highly versed into what we're going to be talking about today. I'm so excited about this topic because, Steve, I'm very, very passionate about what the role of a protector is. And, you've had the opportunities to come down to the U.S. and see kind of like some of these like forums where I'm going to say they use the word protectors get together in a room and basically have conversations and trainings and understandings. So, there's something that happened in the last week or so that, we both had conversations about, and we both felt strongly about kind of how things ended up going on. I thought maybe it'd be perfect because you have not only such a great insight, but you have a beautiful voice that I think would.
Thank you. I don't want to say that. Before we actually get into today's topic, what we're going to talk about is violence and perhaps the role of security, the expectations, the requirements, and even some of the legal requirements. Like we just a couple of weeks ago, we did a joint presentation, as you recall, at Canadian Special Events Live. You and I, we spoke to a very large number of event planners, and we spoke to some issues regarding safety, issues of litigation, what could go wrong at an event. And one of the areas that we spoke to that collected group about was violence and expectation of response. If you have a fight, unfortunately break out, if you have a person start to act out, if a person needs to be restrained or detained or removed, ejected from your venue, whether alcohol is involved or not. But here we had a situation after that presentation. Situation occurred downtown Toronto, a major part of our major thoroughfare, and Yonge and Dundas Square went extremely viral, if you will.
And for those listening abroad, Yonge and Dundas would be kind of a smaller version of Times Square in New York.
Sure. Yeah, it's a major thrust. It's a significant collective area where people gather, everything from celebrations to demonstrations to just a very, very busy part of downtown Toronto. GTA, of course, Greater Toronto Area has now a population of 5 million people, and this is a real hot spot for it. But what we saw was a fight, an altercation. Two ladies, two women really went at it. And it's what occurred over that brief video, and I think the video was 6 or 7 minutes, something like that. But what caught our eye, and what was actually the genesis of today's podcast, was the presence of security, and security standing by and watching. Now, we did have the benefit of audio with this particular videotape. And what would be expected in that circumstances? Would you expect security? I have, of course, looked at the contract and the expectations from that. But it would appear that these are security that are, retained and deployed for purposes of Yonge Dundas Square, that particular site. And contractually, what are they required to do? What are they expected to do? What is the property line on the street? But still, you have 2 or 3 licensed security guards in uniform standing by watching what I would consider to be a violent assault on a woman that wasn't just over a short segment, and over an expanded period of time. There's actually 2 or 3 incidents, including, and I actually caution our viewers with respect to who are offended by violence, you actually see a person stomp another person's head, and you actually see an individual who has her head rammed into a metal pole, while security are standing by, observing. We do see attempts to, intervene, attempts to mediate. We see what appears to be a Toronto transit inspector, public transportation inspector show up. You see him start to initiate verbalization, try to talk these people down. And you actually see what appears to be just a passerby or a street person physically intervenes and just try to break these incidents up, which gathers us today, what we just speak to, training, expectations, requirements, and this component that we call duty of care requirement that, depending on the nature of this goes, I have no information whether this lady's injured or not. We'll see to that. Perhaps there's some follow-up. But this may have been prevented. This could be mitigated. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Listen, I think this is a very relevant topic. I think this should also be a wake-up to the industry as well, for many who are participating in it as operators, about, are your people trained? What kind of messaging are you letting your people know when you're going out to deal with situations? I feel, Steve, a lot of people look at security, and I can say this from our end, from our perspective, because we are an organization that hires people on a regular basis. When they look at this as just a job, when you're applying to a police service, if you tell anyone that you're looking at it as I just want to get paid good money, you're not doing this for the right reasons. When I saw that video, and we're going to have a chance to see it, and for those of you that haven't seen it, you're going to probably potentially be shocked. It's hard to watch this video, especially if you're not used to seeing this kind of issue or situation. But it's something that was caught on camera, and see, not everything is always caught on camera. So I would say we're lucky to see something that we could potentially address. But the hopes from this as well is that people that are looking at this is that it makes them think twice about maybe how they operate, because I'm assuming that there's chances that lots of lawsuits can be thrown into the mix here.
Oh, it certainly could be, depending upon the scope and what was the causation, the genesis of this altercation. Now, I will caution the viewers, and ourselves included, that we don't know what the causational factors were of this altercation. The videos we'll see in a couple of moments starts off with a physical altercation, a fight or a struggle, if you will. We don't know what led up to that.
Right.
However, what does certainly take place in the video over a short period of time, a couple of minutes, shows a level of violence that would shock a lot of people, as you're saying.
Okay.
And what is the expectation to intervene, to stop? At what point do you try to take reasonable steps? And that's the premise here. Reasonable steps to stop this from getting worse. This could have been far more tragic than what we saw. I don't know if this has been reported to police. I don't know if there's a current police investigation or attempts to identify the participants involved, or even attempts to identify the security company involved and the participants and what, if any, documentation they supplied or reporting methods were in place or expectations that were bestowed upon them by the employer or the City of Toronto. I don't know. Okay.
Well, look, these are all important things. So I think maybe what we should do is jump in, get a chance to take a look at this video.
Sure.
Just wondering if it's best that we maybe mute the sound, or should we have the sound as well?
I think the sound is important because you hear some verbiage being used by some of the participants that speaks to a state of mind. And you do hear, certainly when the passersby engages, or the TTC inspector, I believe it's an inspector, engages, some of the verbiage that individual states, which speaks again volumes to what security could have done, could have considered, and may have applied.
Okay. So let's do that, Steve.
All right.
Let's take a look at it.
All right. So we're starting right here. You see 2 participants locked in each other's arms, and just in the upper portion of the video, which you'll see transpire in a minute, you see the one person standing right there with the arm extended. That's a security guard. Let's just see what unfolds. Now you see the second lady with a white shirt. It would appear to be familiar with or know, and see that foot stomp. A stop there. That's a very, very aggressive, very violent stop.
Now, Steve, for those that are actually listening and not having an opportunity to watch this,
right,
if you maybe want to just describe what's happening in the video right now. So we have a woman right now that is being assaulted on the floor in the middle of Yonge and Dundas. It looks like to be, what time of the day would you say?
It's probably midday. It's
okay.
Well lit. I have no indication that was first thing in the morning or later in the evening, but well lit. And this does not appear to be by lighting, this by natural lighting and sunlight. But you see here the lady with the denim or the darker clothing, she'll stand up and she's going to administer a foot stomp on the grounded person.
Yeah, there it is.
Very violent, right leg, right foot, right onto the grounded lady's head. And this starts to unfold in front of us. Now you see her, surprisingly, walk towards.
And look, she has a child apparently right now as well.
Yeah. She's apparent to be either a caregiver or a parent, but in charge of a young child in the stroller. That for some would be extremely unsettling to be able to see that. Now they see the gentleman just to the right on the screen. He seems to be questioning, the actions of the lady. I'm not certain what his role is, or if he's familiar, or if he's a passerby. But we'll see him participate again or try to intercede a little bit further on in the video. Now you see what appears to be 2 security guards.
Yes.
Some communication I can't pick up, but they're talking to themselves. You see the one security officer just in the front of the screen.
And for those that are listening, they're standing probably, it looks like about 2 to 3 feet away from the actual fight. So they're almost hovering over them.
That would be fair. You see the one security guard with his hands in his pockets. And I can't tell right now on the screen, you see the lady with the white shirt. She has her hands underneath the chin, underneath the head area. I can't see whether the hands are positioned to administer a choke or whether the lady, I would call it the victim in this case, is being choked. I have no real indication, but there's really no verbiage going on between the two. Again, there seems to be some conversation between security and the lady. Can't really pick up the nuance. And there again, the initial, I would say for lack of words, the attacker seems to be beginning. You see starting to administer strikes.
Right.
Okay.
And again, directly in front of security.
Yeah, no attempts to physically remove that. Now she picks up a sandal or a shoe, the second shoe, and she used that in a second to also administer slaps or strikes with the lady, holding her by her head. You see there, slap with the shoe.
And one thing that's actually a little irritating for me, Steve, is that there's probably, because the camera's turning in different angles, it seems that there's at least 20 to 25 people that are around the area that are either ignoring this entire situation, potentially taping the situation, or just observing. Like they're literally observing a WWE match right now.
Well, yeah, sad to say. The gentleman I earlier referenced, you see his hand there in the baby stroller, so I'm not certain there's some...
Like if they're a couple.
If they're a couple, if they know each other, familiarity, that would be only subjective at best. But as it goes through, there's really nothing preventing or mitigating this lady from, accessing the victim again. Straight. Just taking a look at the screen and the area. But now I think we still see 2 security guards present.
Mm-hmm. And now someone's coming now.
Yeah. Upper portion of the screen, you see what appears to be a TTC inspector, Toronto Transit Commission inspector, public transportation supervisor. He comes forward. Now, that would generally not be his role. He's not approaching, as I would see it, in the capacity of the TTC. But perhaps as a private citizen, as a person wearing a uniform, certain expectations, common decency, common sense, if you will, approaches. Yeah. And if you listen to what he's saying, he starts to attempt to de-escalate. Listen to what he says here. This is extremely fruitful. Don't be caught the initial commentaries. Okay, enough is enough.
Yes.
It wasn't threatening, wasn't administering threats or ultimatums. But then he just tries to take a little bit further action by directing the participants to separate and move forward. And just hear this context of what he's saying.
Okay.
Move away.
Yeah, he's giving direction.
Yep. I would deem that to be reasonable steps.
Okay.
To try to break up. Security standing by there. This TTC inspector is certainly taking far more action than what the present security officers did.
Now, a TTC inspector, by no means are they under the provisions of the Security Act.
Absolutely not.
So he's basically doing something completely outside of his scope of work.
I would think so, certainly as a private citizen, as a concerned citizen.
Yes.
To do the right thing, the just thing, to come to the aid of a person who is being assaulted.
Okay.
Now, there again, the gentleman we were speaking to earlier, conversing with her, not really saying what or hearing what he's able to say, but not as an assaulting, but communicating with her. And security stepping away or stepping back from the scene. Now, as you see there, security have now somewhat left the immediate area, certainly doubled or tripled the distance, as you initially pointed out.
Right.
But no intervention, no presence.
Right.
Weren't taking the stand or the scope or the role of what the TTC inspector was, not even providing any verbiage.
Right.
They backed out of scene. But I alert the viewers, this situation is not over. It's not like the people standing just in the back of the incident. They will return, and the assaults will continue. Now, for lack of words, I would call it the attacker one, what appears to be the denim top. You see the TD inspector now attempting to engage.
He's still trying to. It looks like he's still trying to calm her down.
Yeah,
Yes.
that would be reasonable. I would
Yes.
expect that from a licensed security professional.
Right.
Meeting that component of duty of care for that particular site that they're deployed. But you see a role being performed and reasonable steps being taken by a person. That's no contractual obligation, perhaps a moral obligation at best. But that is what I would expect. That would be reasonable in context. There are circumstances at times when I expect security to physically intercede. But if they're, for whatever reasons, they feel they can't, or they're at risk or threatened, what this TTC professional is doing speaks volumes to reasonable steps and intervention.
Okay.
And again, you see for a period of time, TT inspector taking a role. I don't know a police to be notified. I don't know a police are en route. I don't know. I'm not certain if someone is called 911. That certainly would be requiring a 911 presence. I do hear sirens in the background. It certainly could be another call that they're on, but this is downtown Toronto in the hub. Security are still, once again, someone in the view, but distant, backing away. And ideally right here, this would be the ideal time for at least the one security guard to step in between, try to stand between, and try to verbally direct,
Right.
request, not command, but try to appeal, please, clear away, police are on the way, you don't need to hurt this person. Something reasonable at least said to this. There was no such verbiage caught
Right.
on this video. Now you see her return, and this is where the assaulting process starts to continue. Her friend does appear to try to take her back.
Right.
But this will unravel again in a moment.
And her friend is not by any means a security guard. She has plain clothes on, and I'm just saying that.
Now you see a little bit of a disagreement between the two. And you're right. I'm not certain if she is a security guard or not. She'd be off duty. Who knows?
Yes.
Whether she has any training, I don't know. But she certainly seems to be trying to be a little bit, come on, back her friend off, remove her friend from the process. Now, once again, we get into some verbal discussion. Another assault,
yeah.
Another slap. And you just seen one gentleman on a bicycle show up. No idea whether he has any knowledge, but you'll see this person adopt a role, still with the view of the TTC inspector.
Now, I think right now, because they are focusing and they're on the TTC inspector now, just observing. I think in his mind, he may feel at this present moment that I've done everything that I can to try and at least ensure that they are not going to go back. It's getting to that point now where he might even be thinking, hey, I wonder if security is going to step in right now, because that is their job.
Well, I believe that would be their job. I do
Yes.
agree with you in that context. I don't think the TTC, that would be his anticipated role or requirements. I thought he was very vigilant, very kind for what he's trying to do, very appropriate. Speaks volumes to the nature of what he perceived his role to be. Mm-hmm. But there again, you're right. It would appear security have taken a backseat role, if any, in watching this transpire and carry on. Now, I pointed out, a gentleman on a bicycle is now starting to converse, and you'll see this gentleman actually physically engage a couple of moments here as the video unravels. Now, the lady appears to be walking away. She'll go over to the TTC inspector here and start conversing. I really don't know what that conversation consisted of.
Can you pause for a sec?
Yeah.
Interesting that the lady is having a conversation with the TT inspector and not with security.
Right. It could be for a number of reasons. Certainly, I think she would have recognized the TTC inspector, took some action for her safety. For that reason, the lady could have been drawn to that. But there will be no attempts that I could see here from security to take any interactive measures or steps. And she certainly didn't go to them or stand behind them for protection.
Okay.
You would have to speak to her, obviously. We'd have to speak to the lady or the victim, if you will, to find out what her thought process was.
Right.
But nobody was really coming to her aid. And there again, I caution the viewers of this podcast, more violence is going to be bestowed upon her momentarily. Now, the gentleman on the bicycle again, that's an interesting role. He'll come back to it. You see some conversation. Can't pick up an audio what they're saying. Can't tell whether this lady has suffered injury or trauma. Don't know. But there again, the initial combatants progressing, it froze it there. You notice she's approaching the victim. I will identify again. But you notice the gentleman who was on his bike has stepped off now, and he's starting to take a little bit of an active role, trying to stand in between. And you'll see that will continue. See some conversation. He's trying to intervene. He's trying to stand in between. And he seems so putting himself at risk, I will say. Not being assertive, but he does certainly be trying to break them up, try to create some distance. To me, that's remarkable. There again, that's a role of security.
Absolutely.
Not the average citizen. And you see again now an assault process with hair pulling. And I caution the viewers again who are offended by what you're about to see. Head strikes. And when I say head strikes, being literally your head being banged against that metal pole behind her. But if you notice the gentleman's arm, he is trying to intervene, trying to provide a reasonable level of protection, which contractually you'd think that would be obligated upon the security firm.
He's trying to do the best that he can do without virtually any training that we can see. Just trying to be a good Samaritan, a good human being.
I think so. I don't know if he's had any training or what compelled him to intervene. But that's what, if I may say, be so bold, that's what decent people do when
I
you
agree.
see violence take place.
I agree.
I don't think you should have to be trained or compensated, be on a salary to intervene. But you pointed out earlier that how many people, standing by watching, and not many people want to get involved.
I'm going to get into that later on. That's a big pet peeve of mine.
It is.
Very big pet peeve.
I think, moving forward, we'll see here what happens with this intervention. And you start to see some assaults. This is not stopping, but you see that, John? He's really physically trying to intervene.
Right.
And by doing so, he is placing himself at risk. You don't know what you don't know with these sort of situations, but he's actually trying to separate the combatants. I don't see security's presence. I don't see security intervention. I don't see security attempting to assist. These ladies are left to their own devices, citizen involvement to whatever degree, and security is not noticeable and absent, if you will, from this video footage. You see some administration of punches.
And then you also saw a passerby with a phone actually recording this. A
filming.
few people are recording this.
And now, of course, they've both either fallen or being taken to the ground. Again, that gentleman is attempting to intervene. And this video was only filmed for another few seconds, and then we don't know what really transpired afterwards. That was the extent of the video feed that was shown initially on Twitter, social media, and then I believe is also gone to YouTube. They're again restricting of the hands, and he's trying to intervene. That gentleman is doing a security role or a law enforcement role. And as looking, scanning in the video, I'm having a hard time assessing the location of security.
Now, you have some people actually challenging or not challenging, throwing out to actually let them fight.
Yeah, that's a sad part of people's involvement. See all people standing, nobody coming to his aid.
Right now, there is literally a circle, as if all surrounding this fight happening right now.
Yeah, and you see another gentleman there just attempts or seems to be attempting to assist that gentleman with the cap.
Right.
As we're coming through. That's the video clip as
Okay.
we're seeing it. Which caused the genesis for us talking today.
I'll tell you, Steve, I'm very disturbed by this on many fronts. I'm disturbed that security who are paid by the client, and I'm assuming the client is Eaton Center, and I'm not going to reference their organization name, but I'm assuming that a client has hired this company to come in and provide a individual that can intervene, because the role of security, from what I understand, is to protect asset, to protect the public, to protect environment, which is
That's accurate.
property.
That's accurate.
That bothers me. What also bothers me is the just the general public not intervening. For myself, if I was there, and again, everyone can always say, if I was there, but for me, knowing who I am as an individual, I would have jumped in there to stop the fight, because that, again, is what, as you said earlier, just the goodness of humans. Nobody wants to see each other hurt, right? It really much, it's one of those things where you don't see often. We know it happens often, but we don't see it often. Let me ask you a question, Steve. What is the legal responsibility of security in this environment? And what is the duty of care?
Okay. There again, just to preface it, I'm not a lawyer. I do legal work. I don't provide a legal opinion. That's not my role. As an expert, you look at the evidence. I would speak to what expectations would be in regards to training, the limits of training, the thresholds of training. I would look at a training curriculum, how it meshes up, if you will, within a contract and obligations. We have not seen, we're not even certain which security company is involved here. And for professional reasons, we wouldn't, even if we did know. Mm-hmm. We would need to contractually look at the obligations, the expectations from the company that was retained and deployed to be there, their scope and their role. And historically, there's different sorts of expectation required. If you're working at pubs and taverns and live events, there's an ejection process, and that would just clarify a removal of a person. If you're in a licensed establishment or if you've been disorderly, your conduct is deemed to be undesirable, you could be removed from a venue. We spoke about that at CSE Live just a short time ago. And what we look at for event planners, or whether it be contractual obligations, what is the expectation? What's the role? If you've got a person that needs to be on your property line, would require to be restrained, detained, perhaps arrested, or removed. Who does that? What expectations do you have? So that's the first area of requirement. There are some provisions required in contracts to only stand by, observe, and report. I don't know if that's the case here. Mm-hmm. But I'll get into the topic of moment of duty of care. That would not eliminate perhaps your legal obligation. With respect to wherever we go, if there is deemed to be a particular location, whether you pay access fees to get in or you're invited in or in somebody's property, in Ontario, certainly in Canada, but in Ontario, you have a right to expect a reasonable level of safety or protection. That would be bestowed upon the owner or the landlord, or in this particular case, the property management, if you will, who's overseeing that particular site or that property. So that starts off, now, if they deem it to be necessary to provide security, you're quite right. Security, as licensing provisions are, to protect people and assets and property. Mm-hmm. Reasonably so. They're not police officers. I'm not saying that they are. But with that is the layer or the type of intervention you expect. Now, you can have certainly a physical intervention. I'll talk about the limits and thresholds of that in a second. But you certainly have what would be reasonable. So we saw the TTC inspector there walking up to people, okay, we're done, move on, let's go clear out. That could be reasonable. Right. That could be a reasonable attempt. Depending on physical intervention. For example, if this were a bar, a typical bar or pub or tavern, you would expect at times security staff or staff to intervene, physically intervene, separate people, and to make certain that you're removed safely and moved on your way home. But on a street situation, the conduct here, and we saw criminal conduct, you would have, by the way, as a citizen's power of arrest. Mm-hmm. With nothing to do with be a security provision, if that is something you deem to be appropriate. Now, the issues of personal safety also becomes a consideration. If you feel you're at risk, if you feel you're exposed to violence, as a citizen, as you know, you would certainly have an opportunity. The concept of what expectations. So in terms of training for security, there is training available depending on your scope and your need. That could be almost an emergent response. You guys, when I see your particular company does healthcare training, your healthcare team and the sites you work at, and you work at Live Event Nations, you also be in a position to physically engage, restrain, remove patrons, help staff, keep staff safe, keep patients safe, keep doctors safe, patients safe from each other. You deal with issues of mental health. You deal with people in crisis all the time, and people are displaying signs of mental health. And you're equipped and you're trained with intermediate weapons, batons for distance and for safety. Mm-hmm. Your staff, you train your staff, and your staff is trained in restraint mechanisms, how to safely hold a person, and other physically violent, how to take them down without hurting them. Restraint, your training, your particular firm has training in handcuffs and restraints, mechanical restraints. Mm-hmm. Put their hands behind their back, summon police assistance, and a safe transfer to the arrested party. So those are avenues available to security firms. But the biggest areas that I see is about taking the reasonable steps. We saw a citizen, and I don't know who that person was, but the gentleman with the hat, who's initially in the bicycle, he physically attempted to intervene. He put himself at risk. He put himself in between. That could have been reasonable. Security could have tried it. Now, not being inappropriate here, but there were 2 females. You had 2 males. I'm not certain if the security guards could say they were physically afraid of being assaulted or physical harm. If that was the case, they'd have to be interviewed to find out what their perception was. But even being up close and personal, they could have removed that citizen out of the way and tried just to stand in the way, both of them. I didn't see any evidence that suggests that they were going to be assaulted or not. We didn't see that. But there's a whole plethora of considerations security have. But bottom line, just to try to answer your question clearly, depends on the contract, the requirements of the contract, and was the contract fulfilled. In the contract itself, the language of the contract, with whichever the client would be and the security provider, what would be the requirements of their job description, the job performance, the areas of expectation, where you are to do what you're supposed to do, and what's required to meet contractual obligations.
So, Steve, let me ask you a question. So, if the client states to the security operator, the agency, and says, "Look, we just want you guys to observe and report," if that was to state, and they say, "Yep, no problem, we'll do that," and that's exactly what they were doing,
right? Would
they still not, under duty of care, have a legal obligation?
Yes, they would be. Absolutely. Because under the Occupier Liability Act, and that's the area of the statute you're speaking to, that's the law that speaks to the areas of providing the reasonable care of safety. And the duty of care is the particular standard of conduct that you would perform or be, in terms of your behavior. And that doesn't automatically mean a physical intervention. It could be, but even if your duties were, say, to observe and report, you could still be personally held accountable because you would be considered an occupier by your role, by the fact you're paid for by the entity, if you will, to be there. And the threshold of what you did, you stood by and watched me be assaulted. And it wasn't just a spontaneous assault. Numerous blows. That was roughly a 6 or 7 minute video. It could have gone on longer. It could have been a bit of a lengthier process. During that period of time, what steps did you take to provide my reasonable safety? Perhaps they called police, not certain. Perhaps they spoke to their supervisor. But the forms of intervention, verbally, I didn't hear. Or to what degree, it was certainly not efficient, and it's trying to stand in the way, trying to break people up. Those are the 2 areas. This could go litigious. This could become quite litigious. There is the evidence there that video could be evidence. And the causational factors, you stood by, watched me assaulted. I was stomped on my head, and my head was banged up against the metal pole. What did you, if you were one of the guards, did you take any steps to intervene and try to provide my safety? If not, you, the entity, and the security company could all be held accountable.
Absolutely. Now, the one thing is that appearing on the video, it would have seemed that there was 100% injury sustained. We don't know what the degree, whether it be a couple of bruising or a concussion. But let me ask you this. What would have happened? Because this is the thing that I find that we never really look at. When I say we, I mean as maybe just in general. We never look at the worst case scenario. Because if that was to happen, what happened if this woman was to have come back, security stood back, did nothing, she took out a knife and actually killed her? Wow. Could security be criminally responsible now for doing nothing? Could it go as far as that?
There again, perhaps a legal question. I want to be careful how I respond to that.
Okay.
But the initial causational fact, standing by not being a peace officer, I don't see the criminal culpability, if you will, for security action. The culpability would be more litigation-wise, as I would see it, and statute-wise. But generally speaking, for criminal negligence areas, it would be your physicality and your attempts to control, which led to a death. I don't see the Good Samaritan Act is not enforceable.
Okay.
People being decent is not enforceable. And a defense for those allegations is I was afraid.
Okay.
And there'll be a legal defense.
And that 100% is legitimate. Like if those guards were genuinely fearful for their lives,
yes.
One could say then, like, well, how did they, enter in this industry, in this field, which is another topic. Because to me, like Steve, what bothered me about that part of the video was that there was no attempt. There was no attempt from what we see.
Right.
From what we see,
video displayed.
Right. From what we saw in the video, there was no attempt to calm the situation down, to kind of do what some of the passerby citizens
the
were
TTC
doing.
inspector did.
Correct.
So here's the question I would ask you as a security company, and just place if that was your firm in there, I would ask you, what would you expect your guards to do contractually? What are they trained to do? What sort of training would that be applied? And what do you look for in terms of expectation from your guarding community?
Oh, thank you. I'd love to answer that question.
Please do.
So one of the things that we've done in our training is a course, again, Stay Safe puts this course out, Management of Resistance Behavior. followed by...
It's a good course, I hear.
It is an excellent course called also MORB.
Yes.
And there's also some more, again, I'd be talking about a training suite catalog that Stay Safe puts out through effective communications. But there is a lot of how to de-escalate a situation.
There's layers.
That's right.
Yeah.
And obviously that's the whole use of force model as well.
Right.
The attempt to at least showcase, if I saw this and through our investigation determined that our guards did not even try to de-escalate through communication, right? It would be a big issue for our organization.
Right.
Because for us, we take the protector mantle very, very seriously. We are hired to, as we said, protect humans, to protect property.
Sure.
And if somebody doesn't do that, because I've heard comments, Steve, from even people in our past, in our organizations, things, you would not pay me enough to jump in to jump into a fight. You could not pay me to do that. When I start hearing stuff like that, it clearly means all this, you're not a right fit for this job. You're not a right fit for this industry. The people that come into this industry need to have something from within that says, I'm doing this job knowing that anything could happen. We have a situation with one of our personnel were injured on the job, and we were dealing with WSIB, and their whole thing was, is there anything that they can do on the job that would not require them to interact, to not do well, this is not security then.
Right.
If that individual had an administrative ability and we had an administrative need potentially, but in the role of security, the expectancy is, and this is what I told her, anything could happen. You could be at a 5-star hotel,
right,
and there could be a shooting, and you could be at a church. Anything could happen anywhere, and you need to be ready, knowing that if I'm going to jump into this profession, into this career, whether it be leading even to policing, that anything can happen, and I have to have the ability to respond. But I also need to bring on from training to help me do that.
Absolutely.
So
we need to train our people, and thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
I need me to put you on the spot.
No, for sure.
We need to train our people to be able to recognize and respond to adversity and potential violence. The duty of care component is huge. And I'm not expecting, please don't misunderstand me, I'm not saying knowingly place yourself at risk.
Right.
If any point you were engaged to try to break up a fight and you felt there was violence, absolutely, I expect you to remove yourself, disengage, if you will, from that situation.
Right.
By the way, our training also encourages that. And I don't know if I should say this, just 5 days ago, I had the pleasure of providing a full-day presentation to the staff at Live Nation's Budweiser stage.
Okay.
And there we spoke about duty of care. We spoke about the response. We spoke about de-escalation, recognizing violence, how to respond to violence, and what the requirements of effective communications are, what you say to people in heated moments, how you try to create through verbiage accountability, those sort of components. So we do that with a major concert player here in Canada, if not the world.
Yes.
We do that. And even when we spoke to the CSE, Canadian Special Events Live Forum, there again with event planners, reminding people is that you might need security provision within your midst to keep this a safe event, safe for your patrons, safe for the staff. That could, by the way, extend even to the parking lots, the access and egress of your staff, of your patrons, your parking lot. It could be just outside, around the corner. And you're right, violence and issues of those areas have become a security required matter. So did the security company fulfill their contract? That could be open to debate or review. But also, we also take a look at optics. We have to take a look at community standards. I don't think many people that I associate with, at least, would view that video and think that's okay.
Right.
And the issue of PR, public relations, I don't think many people in a downtown hotspot of the core would think, this is a contracted security. I don't think it's right that people, women or children or men or whichever, should be exposed to violence. Security is present, and nobody's taking any form of action. What were you thinking? That's my loved one. That's my family. That's my partner. Why?
Right.
So I think people viewing this podcast, unless you have a particular agenda to say no,
yes,
and you think it might be solicit perhaps an inappropriate review to say, oh, you're criticizing my firm. I'm not doing that. I'm talking about optics, protection. You got security standing by doing absolutely nothing. That begs the question, why? And why not? Like, what were you thinking?
No, for sure.
And I just have a hard time as a citizen. I'm not a security company owner, standing by and watching. Because I agree with you, sir. I would personally get involved. I would try to do the exact same thing to prevent anyone from being assaulted. I just could, in good conscience, walk by that.
Well, Steve, you've actually had a very, I'm going to say, a very successful career, being utilized as an expert witness, being brought into situations where you have to provide, testimony,
Yes.
or bring your expertise to a situation. I think, honestly, I'm convinced, whether it's true or not, that a lot of security companies have never been in a situation where they've had to go to court because of a situation like this.
True.
And
True.
I think maybe for the viewers listening, and even maybe for operators, because we have operators that are coming in that are starting companies. And I think it's important for them to know what happens in a discovery when something like this now gets brought in, where now they want to just take out the company and there's a lawsuit going against them. What happens in the discovery process where they want to discredit right now the company when it comes just to merely training if they have it or not?
Sure. Excellent question. Actually, just prior to responding to that, just tomorrow, this, as we speak with this podcast, this is a Thursday.
Yes.
Tomorrow, I'm actually in trial. I'm in a virtual trial. And some of the trials in Ontario have not gone back to live settings. I'm in a virtual trial. And the focal point of my appearance tomorrow is to review my report that is submitted. And I'll just set the stage. It was a bar, it was a pub in southwestern Ontario. There was a fight inside the bar. And the security responded quickly. And they removed one of the patrons and threw him outside, outside of the venue. And unfortunately, they didn't stand by the door to make certain this person went away. So later on the night, when the other combatant, if you will, came out, he was assaulted out front and he received significant injuries. There was no staff outside. So that was the result of the lawsuit. And the lawsuit was that the actual bar, the tavern, the pub failed to take reasonable steps to provide the protection, knowing of their patrons, knowing that earlier in the night there was an altercation that if you had stayed outside and watched the premise, the likeliness of our client or your patron being assaulted could be greatly removed, if not completely, prevented. So that's the scope of this lawsuit. And the injuries were serious, significant brain damage. This was more than a bruised ego. This person's had a life-changing event occur, and it could have been preventable. So let's go back to that. So that's tomorrow. I'm actually going to be being cross-examined by a sage counsel, by a lawyer, just trying to talk about the areas of my report and my comments as a nonpartisan expert witness. Let's go back to your earlier equation. You're the owner of that bar. You're the owner of that pub. You're the owner of that entity. So something goes awry. Something goes wrong. Somebody's hurt. Somebody receives injury. And we need to take a look at the standards and the process. So we go into what's called a discovery process. It's the early stages of a lawsuit. And what happens is you'd be cross-examined either under oath or affirmation by opposing counsel to talk about all areas of your business. And what we start off is describe your business. What sort of business are you in? What do you do? What is your clientele? Your hours of operation. Set the stage, if you will, for the type of business you run. Next questions we get into the risks that you try to prevent. What is your policies and procedures? Oh, by the way, I'd like to get a copy of all your written procedures and all your policies. And of course, there's legislation speaking to what bars and pubs and taverns must have. So I want to see how you're compliant with the Liquor License Act or Smart Serve, which is a server area, which is mandatory. And let's talk about some of these areas of ejection, removing a patron. What policies do you have and how do you enforce that? So then we want to talk all about that. Then the big thing is, let's talk about the staff working there that night. Were they all trained? By whom? When? When were they trained? Did they pass? And when I say pass, did they receive training or did they read a manual or did they read a book? And it's one thing to say, oh yeah, I read the manual, I read the policy, but how can you ensure that by me being your staff member, I understood the expectations or requirements of your policy? Generally speaking, there needs to be some form of vetting or testing mechanism. I would need to test you on behalf of our requirements to make certain that we understand each other's requirements and our needs. So on that particular, let's take contextually look at what happened. Is there video? Was there reports? Was there documentation? Was there a briefing? Was there a debriefing? Was the causational issues of this matter, was it preventable? And that's what makes up the totalness, if you will, of a lawsuit. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but in Ontario, you only have to show 1% liability to win your case. Wow.
Really?
1%. It's a balance of probabilities on the criminal court, all right? So just a balance of probabilities, just a 1% differential. 1% to show, yeah, there's some areas that you'll be successful with respect to your litigation.
So
Now, the degree and limits as to what, I hate to say, the components or factors would be changed in terms of your impairment, what you were doing there. In this particular case, we saw the video there, is what was was there any provocation before? Was the lady with the baby stroller, was she attacked? Was this out of the blue? All those areas would need to come into it. But at the end of the day, security and Dundas Square, that's the site, and whoever is their overseer could be held, I'm not saying he will be, but he could be held accountable for reasonable steps and provisions to be in place to prevent this from happening. And if not, that would be the causational issues.
Okay, so I'm gonna end with ask you this question based on what you just said, ensuring things like this, reasonable steps to make sure things like this don't happen.
Yes.
Any security operator right now that has employees that work under the title security guard, what advice would you give them, or what do they need to do to make sure that something like this doesn't happen under their watch? What measures would you tell them to do, in the sense of, look, here's the reality. This company may have done everything right on their end. They may have given the training. They may have, provided them all the information, and all that went out the window with the guards.
Right.
But for those listening, to be preventative, because this is really what it comes down to, is
Sure.
how you can prevent these things from happening. What advice would you give them to Steve?
Well, there again, another good question. What we need to take a look at is previous situations. Has anything like this ever occurred before? Have you had altercations, violence on the site before? And what did you take out of that? You use that as a training matrix with scenario-based training or briefing, debriefing, part of your educational process. And what we need to fulfill the contractual obligations. So if there's a fight, there's a struggle, this is what we expect for you. Clearly established. If that was done here, but perhaps this was done by the site, I'm not certain. Maybe this was reviewed. Maybe disciplinary action has already taken place. Now, disciplinary action, Constantine, can also be in terms of additional training, remedial training. It could be consequentially led up to dismissal or suspension. I'm not certain, to what scope. There could be complaints. I'm not certain police action is involved in this. Police would also get access to all the training and all the videos. I'm not even certain if there was video outside the venue that could capture what's going on in Dundas Square. I believe there is. There's probably video footage accessible. I believe all four corners of that area, including opposite from the Eaton Center, is videotaped heavily. Okay. So they'll probably get access to that. So bottom line is, prevent it is expectations done through supervisory intervention requirements. I'm not even certain, sir, if a supervisor was available, or if they were requested to attend, or if a supervisor's attendance would have been different, or if security performed exactly what the client wanted to do. Zero intervention, hands off, no touching, no intervention, and let things be what they are. If that's the case, again, it's not that the trier effect, the judge will assess you, but the public will, the community will assess you. And people are going to say, I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's right.
Right. Well, I'll tell you this, Steve, watching something like this, obviously we can all learn from this. And at the end of the day, really, as you just very well said, is having those preventative measures to come into place. Now, again, us as an organization, we have used Stay Safe, and it's something that I find has been a game changer for us.
Thank you.
And it's not just us. We're not the only ones saying that. There's many entities that I talk to that also use the program. Steve, to find you, staysafeip.com.
That's us.
And you will have an opportunity to, again, look and see the material. If anybody would like to directly contact us, we can give you so much testimonies of how it's been able to apply into the work that we do. And look, just like anything, the more measures that you have in place to help situations like this, the more you're eliminating risk, the more you're eliminating liability falling on you.
Right.
Because it's just you're putting things into practice. You build a strong foundation. You're going to be able to take a little bit of that hit when it comes down to you. But
absolutely. But in fairness to our comments and our review and conclusions, I'm not certain if these guards have received that training that we're speaking, or some consistent, other consistent training program. Perhaps they have.
Right.
The only thing I'd offer to viewers' consideration, I say this to you as my colleague, as my friend, is that I would not be satisfied with the level of intervention that appeared to be attempted or considered on the screen. that would speak to perhaps a review, placement, and positioning, and trying to be a little bit more interactive with people in crisis, people in need, people who are being assaulted, people count on you. One thing in the video, we spoke about it, was briefly going, when the lady did rise, to her feet, who did she go to for support?
She went directly to the person that was not security. She went to TTC.
Right. And I think that in itself speaks volumes to the premise of safety and security.
And by the way, just TTC, for those listening in the U.S., Toronto Transit Commission. So
That's right.
They're the operators of public transportation.
That's correct.
Yes.
That'd be correct. She appeared to go directly to that source as her comfort or security measure. She didn't turn to a recognizable security provision because, quite frankly, it would appear they did nothing for her.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's concerning. That's concerning, Steve, to see that the fact that happened. And again, more will probably unravel over the next couple of months, if anything was more serious than it was. But the reality is, even the people that posted that video,
right.
if you were to go into that comment thread and read the comments, they were disgusted.
I think that's
right?
true. They caught a global perspective of what's occurring as of late in our community, and it's an issue of violence. We're seeing that in all aspects of where we go. We saw it in the opening of a major theme fair at the Canada's Wonderland just 2 weeks ago. Major opening, significant violence, altercations, roaming youth gangs, significant arrests, and police presence now really ramping it up, talking about what is in place moving forward. You have a right to walk through your streets, to use your public transit, to go anywhere you wish to, you gather with others and feel safe. And there's a fear of safety, and this has become a significant impact of, is this a policing function, is it a community function? I think we all need to come together and create an environment where people can feel safe.
No, that's amazing, Steve. Look, I want to thank you for your time and providing these words of wisdom. I think many that are listening, especially under the operator umbrella, can really benefit from this. And it's not too late. If you're an organization that does not have training for your guards, get it. It's not too late, because really we've had an episode before about do not play roulette with this. If you're on that receiving end, if you've ever been in a situation where you're sued, or if you're ever in a situation where everything's on the line or at stake, it could have all been avoided by just making a simple decision.
And I'm not going to be partisan here on your podcast. You have a number of guests. I'm not just want to sell my product. I think that would be extremely disingenuous. What I'd offer is stay safe or whatever. Let's just remove me from the element. I believe if any training that you as a security operative would have should certainly meet the areas of de-escalation and trying to calm people down through effective communications. There needs to be some form of training in documentation reports. And you also need some training in reasonable use of force provisions in those requirements. And the only thing I'd ask you as a provider to seek out is to make certain that the material is insured, that the training program is underwritten and it's insured. Because if something goes wrong and awry, and rightly so, if the curriculum comes within dispute, you should be able to litigate that training program as well. And if the person doesn't have insurance, I don't really know what it says about the training package, but we see a number of training programs out there all the time. And I invite you to challenge the trainer to make certain that you have a copy of their curriculum vitae, their resume. Have they ever qualified? Have they ever spoken to this matter in a courtroom before?
So if I'm a client and someone says to me, hey, use us, we could ask them, show me the training records and all this.
I would ask you, please, hey, I need a certificate of insurance.
Okay.
And if this program, this curriculum is going to be vetted and challenged, I'm going to sue you with respect, because I can't speak to your training curriculum. But if you provide me training curriculum, charge me fees or money for some form of compensation, you expect to make me safer, and it goes wrong, and the program itself is criticized. Keep in mind, self-defense and all these programs are subjective at best. They're not legislated. It's not a governmental standard. It's all private entrepreneurs creating a training program for you.
Okay.
Or out-of-country training programs. Number of training programs I won't mention on this podcast that are U.S. based. They do not have Canadian insurance application. Spend your money wisely.
Okay. And look, at the end of the day, it all falls back to get what you pay for. If you're going to utilize someone who maybe, got his training package from a bunch of YouTube videos and doesn't have anything and he just wants to make a quick buck. Look, this happens.
It does happen.
We see it all the time.
It does. And there's a lot of people out there will take your training dollars and try to tell you you've got a good program. Something goes wrong, they disappear.
Absolutely.
Not fair to you, not fair to the industry.
No, absolutely. Well, look, Steve, again, for us, we're living proof and that's going to be another podcast because, Steve, I'll tell you this, I actually quite enjoy having you on the show. You bring so much, dynamic, perspective that I think is so useful for the audience. And if you're okay with it, we'd like to have you more back and just doing much more of these things.
I love the fact that you portray a message. I'm not selling stay safe. I'm selling some common sense and things to please to look at. The other side, the opposing side, and I don't want to dupe anybody or misrepresent myself or training programs. Offer you right from my heart the truth, no agenda here as to what you might need to defend yourself and others and ones you care about, including your own company.
Oh, absolutely. Amazing. Steve, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. StaySafeIP.com. This is your best way to find out more information. In fact, our website as well, SentinelSecurityPlus.com, we actually have a big tab that specifically highlights the training that we do with Stay Safe. We invite you to take a look at it. It's not just words, there's action behind it to see that.
Thanks, Constantine.
Thanks very much,
and
I appreciate it. Thank
Stay
you.
Safe.
Take care.
This podcast is brought to you by Executive Protection Lifestyle Canada. Make sure to drop by next week and don't forget to subscribe.